Okay. Yeah. Pretty good. Looks all right. Yeah. My name is Michael Zeidler. I'm the technical director for Swetelski here in the UK. Started my career here in Reading at Cattle Pens Depot when the high output train was operating out of the sidings, which look now a bit different. And once we passed the contract on to the next contractor in end of 2009, I stayed on and have since then been working with on-track machines instead. That's what we're gonna talk about today. So as an introduction to our parent company, Swetelski AG has been operational since 1938, when it was still Swetelski Baugesellschaft, but it has grown to a size now that the Austrian version of HMRC has said, this cannot be only a privately owned company anymore, it has to be an AG. So that changed about two or 3 years ago. And we are now employing just short of 12,000 employees in 19 countries, which is mainly Europe. But we have a couple of colleagues down in Australia who went from here there, took a couple of machines with them, and are working there in East and Western Australia with ballast cleaners and tampers and regulators as well. Our last reported turnover from the last financial year was just over 3 billion euro. So we've grown quite a bit over the years. And in general, we deliver all specialist construction projects, which can be the civil engineering bits, tunnels, bridges, highways, but also railways. We currently work on a stretch of slab track works between Stuttgart and Ulm. And we hope that we can apply some of that expertise on HS2, where a colleague of us is working on one of the bidding teams. We do ground and environmental engineering. We property developments. Obviously, being an Austrian company, we are quite specialists in alpine construction. Yeah. And we want to work further into environmentally advanced track systems like HS2. Because for any high-speed rail, the chances are that this won't stay on ballast forever. We have our own research and lab testing, and do project planning for all sorts of projects worldwide. Our railway division, which is possibly the part of the company which works more abroad than others, contributes about 20% of the company's turnover. And just short of 1,700 operators, techs, and engineers. We also have in-house capacity in our workshop in Fischerment near Vienna. You can see it when you fly into Vienna, on the right-hand side, hard to miss, where we can design and build on-track machines and equipment, not being a competition to Plaza, but we've improved one or the other designs that they had. In the UK, as I said, we started with the introduction of the Network Rail High Output System 2 and 3 back in 2004. Then operating the two R900s and one Matisa renewal train, three X-tampers and 2 regulators. And back then we also worked with First Engineering, which is now Babcock Rail, to operate the national fleet of the 08 tampers they took through from privatization back in '97. During the project, we introduced the 2 stretched limo versions of a ballast regulator, which is a bit bigger than the USP 5000 and has a 20-ton hopper, where you can very well pick up ballast where it's not needed and redistribute it to where you really need it. So you can shift quite a lot of ballast on a shift with that machine. And 2 pictures from, I believe that was Rail Life back then in Long Marston of one of the AFMs. In the same year, we introduced 3 Kirov 25-ton cranes. And what initially the impression was from many that it is a bit lightweight, it because it can't lift 120 or 125 tons like bigger ones, it in comparison it's much quicker the way it works, and that it doesn't have to reach that high. It can work under any overhead line equipment systems. So over the years this has proven its place, and I think number of the type is the biggest among the national Kiro fleet. So there are less 810s or less 1200s in the country. We developed our tandem lifting system where you can combine two cranes together, and they work basically out of one control, that when they have lifted and whatever piece of SSC or plain line track there's underneath, that it doesn't over tension it, and they work basically in unison as one crane. Unique to the cranes we operate is a robot arm system, which is attached to the jib, which takes away the rope and the lifting hook, and is basically like an arm for the crane, but an arm capable of lifting 25 tons. And bottom left is the our in-house designed 28 sleeper beam, which can, in comparison to road rail equipment, possibly three times the amount of sleepers from the wagon and distribute along the track in one go. I believe the next one should be the video, which shows you the capabilities of the crane with its attachment. Oh yeah, full screen. Yeah.
Before you play that, do you want to mute that microphone, because I'll be playing it online and therefore they'll hear them both.
Yeah.
Right, sorry to everybody at home, we had a bit of a technical hitch there. We had two playing at once, so bear with us. Okay, ready? You ready, Phil?
Yep.
Right, the cranes. Back to the tampers and regulators. In 2010, we had the chance to grow our fleet after the demise of Jarvis to take over two 8 4x4 S&C machines and two 09 3X tampers who had only been used for about 5 or 6 years, and had a good look through them, did the delivery job, did the inspection and overhaul, and added them to a national fleet across the country. The 3Xs were at that point, I believe, mostly supporting high output, but the 08 4x4s were working. One of them went up to Scotland, and one of them was continue its work that it has been doing since its delivery on the East Mids network. And about the same time, they never mentioned it to us when they started, but we were contacted by Plaza that they were looking into the design of the next generation of S&C Unimats. Following the success of the 09 3X, they have been operating 09 S&C tampers on the continent for possibly about 15 years back then. And they put the design together for an 09 4x4 for S Dynamic with an included dynamic track stabilizer under the trailer. And since we've always been working with Plaza and Toiler on the continent as well as over here in the UK, we came to an agreement that we could introduce this to our tamping framework contract, and went to our, possibly the customer who is most open of all to new technology on the LNE route. And this machine then entered after we got it handed over now 9 years ago in Münster, and it was from then transported to West Ealing later that year, probably arrived around October, November time. And certification is something that takes longer each year. So testing and commissioning and certification went on, so that we only moved it out into Newcastle for further tests and trials, and then had the first successful production shift on the Easter weekend in 2014. And for East Coast route, this has been the go-to machine since then. So it has been tamping more than 2.5 million inserts since then, mostly on the East Coast route. We've had a second one on order pretty quickly after that, sister machine 74002. Don't ask me about this weird numbering. This is would burst possibly the time of this presentation. Because the next ones, they start with a 7.5, so it remains tricky. But these two machines, they were extensively used for the 1 to 5 handbacks of S&C renewals on the East Coast route. Quite successful then, and both machines continue to work on the route. With that growing fleet, we couldn't stay in the location where we started out of Carnforth sidings, which was basically a couple of sidings and 2 used containers. So we had a good look around, and Guidebridge Depot was becoming available. As everybody who has been dealing with network rail property is aware, these things take time to sort it out. So it was basically Jarvis vacating it in 2010 early, and we I think it was December, Santa Claus brought us the keys in 2012. So we could then slowly start to develop the depot, which wasn't more than the old elephant shed where a compact fits in, and not really sufficient for the AFM, which is just short of 50 meters long. So we extended the depot, made it a bit wider to cover some more spare part storage, and so that we could maintain even our longest machines now under a roof and out of the weather. So end of 2013 were the bottom 2 pictures where it was extended and completed, and it has further grown with a bigger office since then. So 3 years later, we've had now to look over 22 machines after the second 0944 arrived, and the fourth Kirov, which are usually local hauled into Guidebridge Depot, since it's not a nodal point on the freight network. Then a year later, the framework contract came up for retender, for which we qualified for the next 7 years. And in that tender, Network Rail encouraged each contractor to invest in additional machinery. So we had the support from our parent company in Austria, and were able to offer an additional 4 machines of basically the same type, which are, as I mentioned earlier, are now named 75012 until 15, just to make it even more complicated. Order was placed in 2018 after we were successful in the tender, and the production of the machines commenced. We paid Plaza Linz a visit every now and then, just to have a good look that everything, all the modifications we discussed were carried out as they should. And they should have been delivered around Christmas 2019, but as with everything, it gets delayed every now and then. And the first machine actually arrived in the UK in March 2020, and it might have even been the Tuesday or the Wednesday or whenever it was of the very first lockdown. So what Plaza UK basically did, they told us, you can't come in for testing and commissioning. We're going to look over it with a skeleton crew. Then we're going to put the keys on the wheel and tell you to pick it up. So it wasn't ideal to test and commission a brand new machine without the OEM. So that was quite tricky to get it going. We had the experience of the first 2, but everybody involved with the Yellow Plant knows that no 2 machines are alike. So there's always that 0.5% difference to the previously built one. Especially with Plaza in, well, Richard isn't here, so I can tell you. It also depends if it's built in Werks 1 in Linz or in Werks 2. Same factory ground, but 2 different engineers teams in the factory. So yeah, they're always in for a surprise. But yeah, now 2 years rolled on. All 4 machines have arrived in the country. All 4 machines are in revenue service. 2 of them on the East Coast, 2 of them on the West Coast, or now Northwest and Central, as they are calling themselves, and working away. A couple of teething problems still to be sorted out, but in general they're working quite reliably. Last year, I think the initial tender was possibly 18 months ago, Network Rail High Output have started to reduce their high output fleet of machines and OTMs, and we were successful in bidding for 2 of the 09 3X Dynamics and 1 USB 5000. So we retired the original ones we bought in 2010. One of them went to Czech Republic. The other one we still keep here for driver training and as a spare machine. And we put those 2 plus the regulator into the national framework contract, so that we now look over a machine of 26 machines across the country. And you can see on the list below which machines of which type work on which route, where basically East Coast, East Mids, and Northwest and Central, it's predominantly Swiatelski looking after the machines, the staff and the routes. And Scotland route is run by our joint venture partner Babcock Rail, where most of their machines are working, but 2 of them are Swiatelski owned as well, up in the north. This is favorite video. Double click. That is the embedded video. I don't know if it wants to work or if it doesn't. Is there anything else we can click? Or?
I'm not seeing any embedded video on my version either.
the bottom. That's a bit depressing.
Shall we move on, or unless you have a chance?
Can't see any embedded video on mine. I'm not
I can
sure how to get
go back.
playing.
Go back. No, forward again.
Yeah. No, it doesn't wanna. Should be an embedded video file, but.
I think unfortunately, they haven't got
Yeah, we move on. You would have seen the comparison between a single bank compact machine, which is being overtaken by a 3X machine, tamping next to each other. So, but yeah, maybe Richard can show you something similar then. Another route we are working on is High Speed 1, or C2L as it has been called before. In 2011, we were awarded the survey, tamping and regulating contract. And since then, Austrian 0932 dynamic and ballast regulator comes over through France and through the tunnel, which is sometimes a problem in itself, especially if it's an Easter campaign, and the French love to strike around Easter. So sometimes the 30 shifts we want to work are cut down to 15 because the machine is held somewhere in France. But overall, it has been working pretty well. And at the start, we had to do a lot of catch-up to do, where we really achieved volumes up to 50 kilometers of plain line tamping and 10 point ends on the network. And we're talking point ends. These are really large SNC on High Speed 1. So they require the double banker SNC tamper, because we've made a bit of a case study to send one of the UK-based 08 4x4s, and there's just not enough possession time to complete the large crossovers they have on their network. And yeah, it has been quite a good contract. We've supplied an even bigger version of the what we use here, the AFM, to the network since 2017, being able to shift a lot of ballast between the London tunnels and Ashford and the Channel Tunnel portal. So that's been quite successful down there. And the next time the machine will be coming around in March and April next year. What we also utilize on High Speed 1, we were asked to supply shortwave tamping, and that's where one of the compacts was converted with the Plaza program Sprinter tamping, which basically measures shortwave track faults up to 18 or 20 meters. And is able to only lift one rail and keeping the other level to improve track and not being spending too much time tamping one after the other. And it has been working since then, up to 25-30 shifts a year, usually to sort out track faults, which cannot be covered by the Austrian machine because it only arrives once a year. So they usually do a bit of work in February and March, and then back in October, November. Each time they have the new measurement trains running over and finding the odd track faults along that otherwise pretty good network. So it is quite a high standard down there. And as a final sales pitch, we have those four machines down there, which are not in contract and which we use north and south for driver training and to cover for other machines when they're in a bigger overhaul. As with every project and work, there are always some issues. So it is very high technology installed on the machines across the fleet, but what we've regularly noticed is that most of the time the tampers, they do an ALC run and use the ALC to compute design on the machine. And yes, it rectifies a share of the track fault, but it never takes it fully back to the original track design. The design tamping is only happening during the initial renewal and possibly one of the follow-up tamps. Then it switches back to measurement and computation mode. On the network rails side, the TQSs, they really only look at the SD values, what the ALC throws out. We've been asked to upgrade machines to DAR or the newer version, the DRP, which collects a lot of data in the track. You can get it on a USB stick, you can get a printout, but it's never really asked for. Again, it was specified by Network Rail in the tender, which put additional costs on the machine, but it's basically gathering dust. And from my experience working in Austria and in Germany, you can't even hand the track back without the output of the DRP these days. Then again, the tampers, high-speed tampers with 3x banks, they can tamp up to 1800 meter per hour with the right operator, but we still have some client reps on site. They don't want to tamp more than 3/4 of a mile and then send the machine away, where it could easily do 4 kilometers in a midweek possession. And adding that up over the week, you could do so much more. But yeah, it's even so that we still see a lot of the SNC tampers being sent out to tamp plain line track with the 3x sitting in the siding. So to some, it is still a tamper is a tamper is a tamper, although there are special tools for each job you have to perform on the network. Another one is ballast regulators. There are only 6 in the country working with contractors. 3 of them are ours, out of 70 contracted OTM across the country. So that might be a reason that there's a lot of measurement computation tamp, because you can dial down how much lift you actually want to have, so that you not leave the track shy of ballast because you tamp back to design. Again, you wouldn't want to tamper out, apart from a sprinter tamper with a shortwave, out to side without a ballast regulator to get the ballast profile right when you tamp it back to original design. Curve laser, I think we did some trials back in the high output days out on the badminton line, and in the tender it was specified that the 2 first 09 4x4 dynamics, they need to be fitted with curve laser, again at cost, never used since the machine were delivered. We've occasionally get the request from site if we can have a look at it, but then the whole thing starts from our end. Our guys haven't looked at it for 2 or 3 years, so they need to get the handbook out. Oh, how do we set that up again? How do we work it? And same as below with the DTS, it was quite favorable when the 125 handbags were all the rage, but over the last 2 or 3 years, that seems to have disappeared again as well. And as soon as you don't use it, we cannot DTS a siding to death just to keep the tickets up. So we have a bit of skill fade there. So whenever it is requested, we try to get as many staff on there as well, just to see how it's set up, how it works best. But it happens not often enough. And we now have 10 machines fitted with it, but it's rarely used. Another one is TQS competency levels. Quite often we have very young blood out on site who have never worked with an OTM before. They have all the tickets to run a site, but cannot differentiate between a tamper and a regulator. I hope there is something addressed with this change now in Network Rail from TQS to SGO, so that the expertise level goes up, but we'll watch the space. And a biggie over the years, no one goes out before the site to mark up obstructions. A lot of the time, cables are buried under ballast, troughing routes are buried under ballast, And yeah, we find everything with our tamping tines, no doubt. we find it. So across all the damage we have with our OTM, 3/4 is from unmarked obstructions, which can be just red bond, but it can be signaling cables, which then gives you an issue with handing back the site on time in the morning, which nobody likes, obviously. So I don't want to dwell on all these negative things, just bit of future developments. This would have been like the handover to Richard. We are working on a couple of projects on our own as well as with Plaza UK. We will be converting or providing the test bed for Plaza, to be honest, to have one of the 8 4x4s modified with a new set of tamping banks, which features electric eccentrics instead of hydraulically driven. And the aim of that is that these only spool up when the banks are lowered into the ground for the actual tamping. If they're up idling, you almost hear nothing. So the noise emissions are massively reduced, and being electrically driven instead of hydraulic motors with a lot of hoses which rub and move, we reduce the amount of those hoses which can burst and spill oil on the network. So there we reduce the risk of oil spills there as well. And in the long run, we also need a small hydraulic tank because of the lesser reliance on the hydraulic system. What they will also install is a sensor package, which basically measures the counter pressure under the sleeper through sensors in the tines. They've been investigating quite a lot in that to gather the consolidation data under the sleeper, and then interrogate what effect that has on track falls, on track longevity. So we're looking forward to that. To look at the whole machine, they do additional modifications also to the engine management, which will result in a reduced fuel usage and exhaust emissions as well. On our end, the Guidebridge depot we are using in Manchester at the moment is a bit landlocked. So on one side there's Freightliner, other side is the canal. So there is no chance to further enlarge that location. So we're looking at a new location further south, and we plan to install a 60-meter 2-track workshop with an inspection pit and full lifting capacity for all of our machines. And on the same location, Stoke-on-Trent actually, we have a demo day scheduled. So if anybody wants to come around on the 21st of June, we will be showing the Kirov 250, doing a bit of test piling in the sidings there. Just get in touch over that. We have a couple of visitors from abroad who are interested in the system, and a couple of guys coming down from Scotland. So that could be interesting to see some yellow kit working out there. And I believe this is it from my end. So if there are any questions, fire away.
So the demo date, is that
2 weeks' time? Yeah, no, that's in Stoke-on-Trent. Grange sidings, yeah.
Is that not the same time as Real Life is taking place?
That's not
Yeah, I think it's 22nd, 23rd. Yeah, it's the same day as the strike is on. So we have a bit of concerns that we can get the crane there, but we can't get it back to renewal site where it's scheduled for the weekend. So yeah, we'll cross that bridge when it gets here.
Very interesting, Michael.
Thank you.
Everything that you've put forward. Can we just go on to the regulators and the DTS? Really, the two machines are used regularly on renewals work, but in actual fact, it's probably much more beneficial to use them on maintenance. Just, can you give us any idea, say during the summer months, because it isn't the usual thing to use both the regulator and the DTS on normal maintenance tamping, how many shifts you actually lose through the summer because they won't tamp? Because of that high, probably high temperatures the next day. But yeah, they don't bother about that on the continent, they just put a DTS in.
Well, losing in tamping shifts, we lost one last night in Scotland, and it's only early June. So throughout.
For that reason.
Yeah, too high temperature in S&C.
Scotland.
Yeah. I couldn't believe it this morning, but I think over the course of the summer it'll possibly only 20-25, but that's only our fleet. Yeah. So and for out of the national fleet with 70 OTM, we provide 17. So we possibly can extrapolate that into maybe 80 or 100, which are lost across all 4 suppliers.
Quite a lot.
Yeah, no, definitely, yeah.
Well, just one supplementary to that then, if I may. As far as the DTS is concerned, do you still have the same problem? And this might be the reason behind the lack of use for maintenance. You've still got problems every time we get somewhere near an under-track structure with them.
Yeah, depending on the infrastructure, you would need to know exactly where you are working on that particular shift, which again is a bit of an issue on the network rail planning side, because we quite or typically are not being told the worksite limits before our machine turns up on site. So it's down to network rail planning to then say, okay, you can DTS for the first quarter and for the last quarter, but in the middle there are some sensitive structures which you can't. And this could possibly be then again in the too difficult box. There are a couple of engineers who try to push it. I think was it Graham Penfold, he did some very good work, and I had an article in Rail Infrastructure two issues ago, pushing for that on maintenance as well. But again, it's still not done enough.
Well, one further thing then, I noticed on there that there is a lack of marking up obstructions, or particularly cables in this sort of business. With the present drive to get boots up ballast, I can't see you getting much of improvement in that in future.
Yeah, we don't see any improvement looking back through the years at all, to be honest, because there are some who really just want to walk in front of the machine and mark up, but under the pressure of a machine that goes at 1,500 meters an hour, you don't have any plans with you. It's dark, so the chance to really spot each obstruction or each cable or whatever there is pretty slim. Yeah. Then again, we deliver around 3,500 shifts each year, and I think last year we hit about 44 times. So it is actually, out of all the shifts delivered, a small amount, but obviously there's always room for improvement.
Thank you.
We've got a question online.
Nope.
Oh.
No, nothing.
I thought you said you had one.
No.
Do you have a question then?
No, I might have one in a minute. There's no one on at the moment asking questions.
Okay. Richard?
Just taking forward this thing about not marking up, which just seems to be absolutely crazy to my mind. But you've just then explained that the proportion of damage is very, very small compared with the enormous progress that can be made with machines. But I mean, is that something that is just accepted now, that there will be a bit of damage? Is it that designers are deliberately making everything less and less damageable by machines working? I mean, what's being done to reduce the even this small amount of damage?
Oh, difficult to say. We know that there are certain types of sleepers where you can protect cables better than just attaching them with cable ties to the fastenings, or to put them into red tubes basically. But from our point of view, it appears to be acceptable, right? Because there is actually a contract clause that for any damage that we do with our machine and it's our fault, they could claim from us, which is rarely exercised. So it is being seen that it is a small amount. The focus is much more actually on environmental damage. So hose bursts, hydraulic oil, which we have in the filled in the machine, which is already biodegradable, so we don't spill mineral oil on track. That there seems to be a much higher focus on that to reduce that further. Right. Yeah. So, and that's why we aim to look into this conversion of the electric tamping banks as well, because that is basically the part of the machine where the most hoses are installed, and they are always in movement. They are under vibration. They are going up and down up to 4,000 times a shift, depending on where it is. And there seems to be a much higher focus on that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, there's someone online that's joined on a phone number, so I don't have a name. They've unmuted themselves. I don't know if they're trying to say something. Whoever you are. Shall I say something? Taking that as a no.
Obviously not. Okay, Rodney.
Fair enough, carry on.
Well, 33 years ago, I just worked out I was maintenance assistant here in Reading, and then I was responsible, amongst others, for the tamping machines. And you brought back some memories. Lack of marking up. Now, my recollection is, and I mean, I might get challenged on this, Tony is, well, having worked in Reading as well, may probably right, but my recollection is, first of all, the tamping machines we had and a regulator were based in the division. And I think each division, by and large, kept its own machines with our own, invariably, local crew who had worked on the ground. So they knew much of the patch intimately. But I seem to remember that the staff were actually paid basically as though they worked ordinary days, but in fact they're not
day, night and night-time shifts.
Yeah, well, they did 2 weeks. My recollection, they did 2 weeks of nights and 1 week of days. And those who were on day shift went out and did the marking up. You know, that was a standard practice.
Started in my time.
No, that goes back another 10 years.
Yeah.
So the marking up would be done properly. I think I can say. I mean, it would be very rare that something went wrong. So there we are. We've got one consequence of, well, effectively, in a sense, nationalisation of the delivery system. But one of the questions you raised is, if you're a national system or nationally based, you need to drive machines around the country. How do the staff get route knowledge? I mean, we used to. Not every member of staff would have route knowledge, not immediately if there was a new drive. But what we had to do is to go down, next door to the diesel depot and get a driver out. But how do you get route knowledge, and how do you drive the machines around the country? That was the first question. But the second was, we had the 09s introduced in my time, and I had the task of finding the right sort of person to work the machine, which was inherently more complicated. So they were being trained down at Westerly, and so I went down and said, well, I want to have a go at driving this machine. So I can say I've actually driven the tamping machine. I don't expect anybody else here, but Peter, you can. You can. But that was one of the more interesting bits of my long career. So going back to the question is, how do you drive the machines around the country?
Well, we employ around 80 driver, operator, maintainers, and yes, route knowledge is always an issue, and also vacancies in train drivers. If you know anyone, we always have 4 or 5 driver vacancies. But it is an issue because we deploy our machines basically from Watford up to the Scottish border. So local knowledge of the track is an issue for the operators, because they can be one night working just outside of Milton Keynes and the next night up in Lancaster. And we drive all our machines ourselves, and I reckon possibly around 10 shifts, 15 shifts a year we require a conductor, because we cannot find any own resource with the required route knowledge, especially when we're basically sent with our machine off our usual patch where we work. And as for competency on the newer machines, it is a bit like when you wanted to employ a good fitter 10, 15, 20 years ago. He needed to have a strong arm, able to work a long bar and a big hammer. These days, it's more you need these electro gizmos who can work with touch screens and multimeters to get the machines, have them continue to work, because they have become so sophisticated that the mechanical bits are not really the issue. But if there are issues in the microvolt area in some of the machine components, the machine shuts down, and there's just Control-Alt-Delete, which will fire it back up again. So that has become a bit of an issue. So some of our I want to say more senior operators, they have said, leave me on the 08 machines. I just have 4 years to go. I don't need to be cross-trained on the 09 4x4s, because it has become a bit of a different world, really. Yeah.
You don't recruit in this country?
Oh, no.
You do?
Yeah. I think we have one Polish chap on the cranes, but all the rest are UK staff. Yeah, we've been recruiting apprentices for the last 7 or 8 years to get them through the workshop, their 4-year apprenticeship together with colleges, and we have also started some 6-7 years ago to recruit trainee drivers, because there was basically just nobody available on the market as an experienced OTM driver. A lot of them that still had 10-15 years to go, they heard the call from Australia that, oh, there's some good money paid down there, so I'm heading off down to Oz to drive trains and machines there. So I don't know, at some point there were about 400 or 500 vacancies in the UK for train drivers. The issue we have is, yes, we train them, we keep them at work. Once they're fully competent, they become dual skilled, so that they're driver and operator, and then our colleagues in the freight operating community, they wave the big paycheck and, don't you want to drive a Class 66 instead? Be home at night. And well, we lost a couple of good guys down to freight across the years. Yeah.
Mike, you've been trying to get a question in.
In terms of marking out for jobs,
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to get out on the track these days. That's the trouble. Everything's been turned
Red zone ban.
zone,
Yeah.
and so there's no way that staff can get there and do any marking up except under the possession. That seems to me one of the problems which we've got to live with now, I think.
Yeah, I think it's an issue also with having enough resource out on site, because having planned for, let's say, 4 tamping shifts on a stretch of track over the week, quite often we have only one guy with us out, and he has to be the COS, he is the ES, he has to see if the barrier attendant is awake, and he has to do the marking up as well. If there would be a second guy who would then look after tomorrow night's work, having a plan with him, and oh yeah, there must be something, I know it's a resource issue, but it could solve a lot of the damage we can do to the track and the infrastructure. Yeah.
Is there a technology solution? Cameras coming on, recognition now for patrolling.
There are a couple of
that's only on the machine.
There are a couple of obstruction detection mechanisms, but like half-inch cable, 4-inch under the ballast. Not a chance. It's the Tynes only find it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So just going back to the issues of failing really to utilise the full capability of your machines, either in terms of their technology or indeed the length of shift.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that? Do you have any feel for it? Does that arise simply because those planning it in Network Rail don't understand its capabilities, or is it that we've got into this mentality? The only thing we wanted to do is this, so that's what we do. But actually, the added cost of doing a bit more to cover the bit more distance would be worth doing, and the same with using the technology. Why on earth aren't we using curved laser? Having had it fitted. Just training? Is it just training?
No, part of it is possibly the long lead times in the planning. That basically now we have now June, July. The routes have to get their figures together for next year's tamping shifts, how many shifts they want in each month, and what then gets actually tamped next year in June will only come out what the new measurement train throws out in May.
Right.
So, and they already located, okay, we're gonna have so many S&C tamper shifts, we have so many plain line tamping shifts, and they cannot shift the program around anymore when it comes closer to the day of the races, basically.
That's why we suffer with wet spots and things like this.
Yeah.
They appear, and it might be months before we get in there and do anything.
Yeah.
A very similar note, actually, to this question from me, there's no one online yet. Particularly DTSing, I listened to presentations such as yourself and various in the past, and the DTS is a wonderful machine and very capable machine. But then I sit in my project office and I authorise my track designs, and that's, there's a whole mentality, especially in the project world that I work in, when I've got a design, we've got a tamper shift booked, the tamper will install the design, job done. What more do I need? So there's a gap, a disconnect almost between we've got to get the track to a geometry, the tamper can do that, job done. And then, but actually there's a bit more. I'm not quite sure how we address that. But
what the DTS does, it basically imposes the first roughly 100,000 tons of train load onto the track.
People don't really think about that. They just it's a tick box. Have we got a tamper? Yes. Okay. Next in planning. Next item in planning. That's the limit of what the planning system seems to see these days. So I'm not really sure even what I'm asking. I'm just offering a perspective and saying, how do we solve this? Well, not sure how we
basically get
the message out that it's a good idea.
If you plan the tamping and the DTSing on site right, you can possibly save up on the follow-up tamp. At least one of them, if not several.
Indeed,
afterwards, and you don't need the possession and all the associated cost, because quite often with the tampers we deploy, the DTS is on the machine anyway. It just needs to be switched on, and we had it quite often over the last 2 or 3 years that they had a 500-yard plain line track renewal on the West Coast main line, and they had the right tamper on site, but they chose not to use the DTS and opened up at 50 miles per hour on the West Coast main line for a week. And you're like, really? What? Because I don't know, Avanti gets a lot of money for that back when they cannot run at full tilt. So that is something
there's a risk aversion as well, because if you can guarantee me that I will get the high-speed hand back, then I will cancel the follow-up tamp shift. But until you can absolutely hand on heart say, I guarantee you will work on the night, and I guarantee you that you won't need the follow-up shift. That follow-up shift we planned in, and it's paid for. So quite frankly, it's just in the plan, and everyone goes, well, there's a risk over there, and I don't need to deal with it. So that might be one of the reasons why we're ending up not using the DTS, because people like surety and know that the plan says that and that happens. And yes, it opens at 50 instead of 70, 80, whatever. But
yeah, we keep on mentioning it to our SCO contact in Milton Keynes, but also in our monthly calls with the routes, that we always offer to any project teams working with the tampers on renewals that we can bring our supervisors to join their whiteboard meetings, just to give a bit more info on the machines, capabilities, possible different working direction could solve issues, and to get them involved. They can take part via Teams or come face to face for those for like detailed OTM planning, and that is available from us, and that can improve site timings. It can improve the outcome of the speed restriction on the Monday morning as well. And yeah, unfortunately, the offer is not taken up very often.
Yeah,
we have two operations supervisors on working in Guard Bridge. They look after the roster, they look after the site staff. One is them on days, one is on nights. So they are available whenever required. So that is definitely a service we offer to everybody who is utilizing our tampers.
Possibly the message isn't getting to the right place.
Yeah, because we had it, I don't know, a couple of weeks on a Sunday. They booked 2 or 9 4x4s back to back. So like almost 20 hours. And we asked them beforehand that this is not a big renewal. Do you really need those 2 ships? Yeah, we definitely need to. And the first crew did nothing. The second crew tamped for 90 minutes.
Wow.
They just wanted to have an envelope of tamping resource to cover their site, but they didn't even look into the very detailed planning that the first tine fell into the ground on Sunday evening at
restoration, and
yeah.
You have a plan, you agree a plan, you get on with the plan, full stop.
Yeah.
That's
they obviously cannot go into commercial detail, but this site has been paying through the nose for that job. And we're all taxpayers, so it's, sometimes we wonder,
Say, I understand you can't go into commercial detail, in other words, the actual numbers, but I mean, in that sort of example, for example, by not using one of the machines, has it added 10% to the total cost of the job, and yet that 10% is wasted therefore, or you know, what sort of proportion of the cost of a job is having all this surplus equipment?
That's safe. I'm not 100% sure how each route deals with it, but a tamping shift can cost a route anything from 8 until 16,000 £, depending on what they use.
That's
and
nice.
if one shift, then if you don't have that one follow-up tamp shift, you don't have that cost.
Yes.
So that would be part of it.
So there's 8 to 16,000.
What the route pays.
Right. But the machine that you had 2 machines, and one of them isn't used.
Yeah.
So
I know different example could be on the East Coast when they were using the DTS on the East Coast route a bit more intensive. They reported back to us that in that particular year they saved around 1.7 million in Schedule 8 payments for speed restrictions after work site. So that basically was money in your wallet, which they didn't have to give back to the train operators. And that should be enough incentive for other routes to go down that route as well.
Okay, good. Rodney?
I seem to remember reading 2 or 3 weeks ago that the evidence given by the PWI for the, what's it going to be called, the Great British Railway, did actually recommend that tamping between maintenance and renewals could be better organised. They highlighted on that, I think. Am I right, Melbourne? Yeah. But it was, bear in mind that pre-1995, one body paid whatever it was. A good maintenance supervisor would, if there was a renewal job on his site, which would have a tamping machine, the maintenance supervisor would make sure that machine, when he was around, maybe only to work the end of the day shift on the Sunday to do the renewal site. That Sunday morning he'd be doing some maintenance tamping. Something we lost from privatisation.
What a revolutionary concept.
Yeah.
It would be very easy for our guys just to, whenever one of the local guys would say that stretch actually needs tamping, so if you have time, please give it a good squeeze. No problem whatsoever. Yeah. But it again, it seems to be too difficult to get the right people talk to each other.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah, sure.
What's the arrangement on the Western here? Is it a contracted tamping organisation or?
We occasionally tamp on the Chiltern lines, but Western is with another contractor. So it's part of the national framework contract, and it's not with us. Exactly. Yeah.
Just not a question so much, but just an observation and kind of a reflection, I guess, on the point around getting onto the track, all those kind of things. I suspect probably the majority of people in this room are used to having previously just turned up to the gate, open the gate, put a high-vis vest on, and walk onto the track, which is entirely sensible. You didn't get killed, you knew what you were doing.
That was someone online.
Which doesn't, it's intended for your safety, it's intended for the risk, the protection of everyone, reversion of risk, mitigation of risk, chance of safety, work accident, all those kind of things, which is not a bad thing, but we've made it so complex to just go on track. Going on track tomorrow, I've got a 30-page application to walk 2 meters from the line, which I have to get signed off by 3 different people. And it's not an excuse, and I don't use it as an excuse, I find every way to get around it. But that said, just to get out to mark up, to then go on site, take your line off, which you've got 4 hours and you might get 5 minutes. It's not an excuse, but the landscape to get out onto the infrastructure has entirely changed. And we now seem to brand it as evil if you want to go out onto the track.
Yeah.
Let's reduce boots on pallets. No. Let's use it when it's appropriate. Don't just go out there for fun, obviously. But there are jobs that need to be done. So I can empathise with the frustration, because it's fairly logical. It's fairly easy to get rid of the problem. Just put someone out there. And we used to do it when I started doing track patrolling and marking and tamping. We did it red zone, we look at it. We did it during the day. We never felt unsafe. We never ran into it. But that's now prohibited and somehow it's unsafe. But keep going.
Okay. On a positive note, I'm interested about your contract with HS1. It obviously works pretty well, and given that the machines can actually do what you want them to do, so let's take that as a given.
Yep.
It's then a question of properly programming and deciding all the priorities for those machines and deciding to do what is needed on each of the individual sites with it. It seems to me, having ridden on HS1 recently, there is a consistency in the way that line runs now, and I actually think it's quite noticeable that the ride quality overall between, or certainly between St Pancras and the tunnel, is actually better than it is between Calais and Lille. There are places between Calais and Lille that are decidedly uncomfortable, quite frankly. Right, it's the same train and all that sort of thing. Somebody's doing the planning right and also deciding on the priorities right on HS1. Would you sort of go along with that and your company feel happy with the way that is done?
They definitely have the right approach on HS1. They obviously started from a very high level anyway, because it is a fairly new network. All the structures are solid. So they've started very early to do all their maintenance tamping with DTS on plain line first, and then have seen that it works for them. So they are DTSing all the SNC tamping now as well. So we couldn't send a tamper without a DTS there anymore. So that's what they want. And throughout the years with doing the survey works for them as well, we're able to optimize the design throughout the whole network as well. It has arrived at a very high standard, and yeah, it works very well for us and it works very well for them. They have now the challenge that their network becomes 25 years old, and they have a couple of stretches where we are tamping every year. So the ballast there needs to be exchanged, and that is something they're trying to get their head around now, how to get a ballast cleaner in without too much disruption to the now increasing passenger services again.
As they do on the continent.
Yeah.
Just one thing then on that with the DTS.
Yep.
This is what I was hoping you would go on saying. Having been involved in the DTSs back in the early 80s, when it was actually a DTS towed by an 07 Tampac that provided the traction for it at the time, we always kept down to a rate of about 600 yards or so an hour, and it had to be a consistent speed. You've now got these within the machines in themselves. The technology has moved on, and also the thoughts about whether you need to go at those very slow speeds with the DTS. So they can now actually keep up with your normal maintenance rate of the tamper.
Yeah, it depends if it's a renewal or maintenance.
Yeah, maintenance.
On the 09s, they can achieve 500, 600, 700 meters of plain line tamping with a single banker satellite.
Yeah.
So that is not a problem. The further advantage on the newer machines is that it's basically the Mark II DTS, where you can vary the down pressure, you can vary the frequency a bit further down if you come through parts of the SSC which you don't want to shake to bits, basically.
Yeah.
So that is a better application of the technology than it is on the first ones. As the AFMs we have, they're either on or they're off. The AFMs usually work at 2,000 meters an hour when they're brushing and regulating, so that is not an issue. But at really slow speeds, you need to watch it and know what you're doing, basically. That's true.
On renewables you will be working more slowly because you're wanting the extra depth and so on. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
There's a comment in the chat. It's come from Ray Pocock. He's mentioned he's got experience of tamper appreciation courses on the East Coast. So perhaps that's maybe something we want to think about again. It's not really something I've ever been on one.
I know. Years ago. Can you hear me? We run tamper appreciation courses as technical staff to show them how to mark on a test near just south of York, to York and Selby. Is that a service you could offer net rail staff to try and train them to mark up properly?
Yeah, we can look into that again. I think we did that when we introduced the first 09 4x4. Our then project manager Matt Whiting traveled around the DUs and everybody who was planning to use the machine, and to get together with some of the senior operators and to have a good look through the machine and what it can do, what it can't do. And yeah, no, definitely we can look into that again now that possibly the next generation of track engineers is out there who have not that depth of experience with the technology.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, thank you, Ray. Well, I think we've exhausted the questions. I think we've had a pretty extensive question time there.
Yeah, there's no more questions online. So.
Okay, if I can send you to
Yeah,
the
sure. Yeah.
co-pilot seat, I'll take over the driver's seat.